Well, hello again. I'm Cheryl, aka Bunny Godmother, and welcome, Magic Mafia. I am a user experience designer by day. I am an actress. I am an author. I am a lot of things, but right now we're going to be talking about my life as a user experience designer. Now, we talk about a lot of subjects on this channel, but this week I found out that I am a finalist for a global award with the Women in Voice Summit. And while I may not win, I figured that was as good a suggestion as any for what we should talk about for this video, specifically my work in the voice design space. What is voice design? What does that even mean? Am I picking voices? Not really. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what voice user interface design actually is, or some of what makes it different than just writing or regular user interface design, stick around. Now, I've worked on voice experiences in a variety of contexts. My first voice user experience design took place on the Nintendo DS on a game called Disney Friends, for which I was lead producer and responsible for the game pitch and some of the design, but the overall vision for the game, as well as all the production-y bits. But one of the production-y bits that fell to me was dealing with the voice design, the selection of the commands we would use, and working with Disney on getting those commands translated to different languages. And that was what we call a grammar-based interface. And grammar being like a dictionary. It's not like the Alexa you have in your house today, which can handle all kinds of fun sentences and sort of random sets of words. It had a very specific list of text, like Ohana for Stitch, or I love you. Just very specific words and phrases. And those were the grammar. And I remember being fascinated by the fact that I could just add one word to the group, like a second word that started with the sh sound, and everything would change. The accuracy of all the words would change. And so it was like this weird interconnected puzzle in all of the languages, trying to figure out how we could make each language as performant as possible. And even if we figured out the United States language and made the starting sounds of each word in the US different, they could all start with the same sound in another language, and so we'd have to get creative there. So that was a really interesting challenge. It turned out, my big lesson there was how important it was that different words in a voice user interface sound different, particularly that starting sound, and particularly soft starting sounds. So sh or s, those things, not great for digital systems. Now, fast forward a few years and I'm working on Windows Automotive, and we had a much bigger purview. We were doing natural language interfaces in the car, and no one else on the team had any voice design experience, and I had a non-zero amount. So I learned on the job and worked with some folks and expanded my knowledge and my responsibilities to include voice design for the car. And that was the first time I really realized how sort of state-based a lot of voice design is. If you've ever worked with a flow diagram, a lot of voice design has nothing to do with the words. I bet you, when you think about what it would take to design an experience like Alexa, you're thinking like, I could write the text she says, and that's like the last step. You have to figure out what people want to do and how they might move through the system first. And then you figure out what the system says in those steps. And so it was very complicated to figure out these flows for, say, you're editing the list of waypoints in the car on the go with your voice. The difference between saying add a stop at Starbucks versus go to Starbucks. Those would place the stop at different places in the list and would have very different experiences and very different flows. So that was my experience on Windows Automotive, where I learned how. And the other thing I got experience on with Windows Automotive was the concept of confidence. Turns out that voice recognition it is not black or white. It is all probability. And when your Alexa or Google device hears your voice and compares it to all of the things it's heard before, it comes back with a list of things it thinks you said, and pairs those with probabilities that it's right. And so it's not coming back with one right answer. It's like, well, for example, if I said play Pirates of the Caribbean, that could mean a lot of things. It could think my intent was, there could be multiple things I mean by that. So it could think that I meant, let's go play the soundtrack. Let's go play the movie. It might have even thought that maybe what I meant was give me the movie, like the movie times if the movie is out. So it might show me different confidence intervals, and I'd have to, as a designer, choose like whether I believe the computer or not. And then for things that sound sort of the same, those confidence intervals might change too. Sometimes it's really not sure what you said because two things sound very similar. And so as a designer, you have to figure out whether or not you want to take action when the system is not entirely confident that it's right. And we spent a lot of time deciding which actions were destructive. Like which actions could you not take back if we got it wrong. For example, if you say call John Smith, but it calls Joe Smith and Joe Smith is your ex-boyfriend, that it got it wrong, that is awkward and you can't take that back. Now you've called your ex-boyfriend and you're connected while you're driving, and that's not a good situation. So that calling is a destructive action. You'd want to confirm that beforehand if the system's not feeling very confident about what it heard. So that's another factor in voice design. So talked about the acoustic uniqueness, how things kind of need to sound different. We talked about the need to kind of figure out how people move through the experience. And we talked about the confidence the system has, or the lack of confidence it has, that it heard you correctly. And those are three major considerations that voice designers have to work with long before they ever get to writing the text. Now, when you actually get to writing the text, we could argue for days on the Alexa team about the inclusion of like a word like the, because we want it. The thing about it is every word you put in one of those prompts is time. And because the system's not going to be able to hear you if you speak over it, people basically have to wait until you're done speaking before they can interact with you. So, with a visual interface, you can put a bunch of text up there and people can just ignore it and click. It doesn't slow them down. But if you add too much spoken text, it slows your customers down. So you have to be very restrictive. So we would have very detailed conversations about every word in some of our prompts. Speaking of prompts, there's some words I've been throwing around. There's some words that we use in voice design. One of them is utterance, which is like the recording of what I said. Before the computer ever gets to it and interprets it and does anything with it, that's the utterance. Sounds like the udder of a cow, but it's actually the thing you said, the truth of what you said, before any computer guesses. The intent is the computer's representation of what a human wants to do. So it might be play music, or watch a movie, or set an alarm. Those can be intents. And the goal of a voice recognition system is to correctly pair an utterance with the correct intent. Sometimes it does better than others. We also talk about things like prompts, and prompts are the thing the system says back to you. So most of your interactions are going to have prompts at some point. Prompt design, most new designers in voice think that the secret to voice design is just coming in and adding personality. But adding personality in the wrong place makes the experiences longer and makes people hate the experiences. It's a rookie mistake. Personality can be fun, but you got to put it in the right places. I see people making that mistake a lot. So, what is voice design? It is the process of figuring out how people are going to move through a conversation and understanding how a system is going to try to interpret a human's attempt to speak to it. There's a lot there. There's technical understanding. There's the abstract representation of conversation, and then there's the actual writing itself. And so folks who think it's just writing, they're in for a surprise. And beyond all that, most people think that voice design is just writing the good cases. Like, hey, turn on the lights. Okay, I turned on the lights. Aside from the fact that you actually don't probably want to say, okay, I turned on the lights, because you'll be saying that all the time and it'll get super annoying. Your Alexa just kind of beeps at you. It is more prevalent that you will be designing for the error cases when things go wrong. It's easy to design things when they go right. The conversations are short. Longer conversations happen when something goes wrong, when it didn't hear you right, when you didn't give it the correct information. Like, it's one thing to say, like, set an alarm for 7:30 in the morning tomorrow. But if you just said set an alarm for 7:30, is that in the morning or the evening? If the system doesn't prompt you, it might set it wrong and you miss your flight. It's not okay. So you have to account for all those situations. Those take up most of your design time. And as a designer, you need to be thinking about that. What are all the problem cases? You need to think about people who are going to give you nothing up front, set an alarm, and people who give you everything, set an alarm for 7:30 in the morning, and people who give you something in the middle, and you're going to have to get some information, but not all. So we need to be creative like that. So voice design is all of those things. And it was tough when I was working at Amazon on Alexa, because while I had been working on voice in other contexts for a while, voice design was still the purview of very few people at very few companies. And most of those people were under non-disclosure agreements. And so they had knowledge that they could not share because their employers would not let them, because they were afraid that they would let slip the secrets. But then we would go and try to hire people, and no one knew how to do voice design. So we couldn't hire. I mean, we'd have to just kind of hire people who we thought would be able to learn. That did not always work out super well. So I felt really passionate about taking like what I'd learned and turning it into like coursework that people could add to their existing design knowledge and become voice designers. And so when I left Amazon, that was basically one of the first things I did, was put together a workshop and propose it at the Interaction Conference with the Interaction Design Association. And my Giving Voice to Your Voice Design talks launched in 2017, where I started to talk people through the basic concepts and some basic guidelines for voice design, so that they could start to build like skills on their own, start to think about things beyond just like, I'm picking the words. And that's kind of led to where I am today with my company IdeaPlats, and trying to talk to people about not just voice design, but like conversational design and chatbots, and also multimodal design, where you're taking not just voice, but like touch or gestures and combining all of that. Your Echo Show doesn't just have voice, it has touch. And, the Google Nest Home Hub, or whatever we're calling it these days, had some basic gestures too. And so to combine all of those things together is actually fairly complicated. And so that's why I wrote my book. And so I've spent the last 4 years and change kind of out in the field talking to people about these concepts, because when I started, no one was talking about them, because everyone was stuck working on the secret stuff. Now there's a lot more people talking about these things. But I believe that's where the award nomination comes from. And it's exciting to see so many people, like the industry so grown, so many people exploring these things now. I was always very passionate that we needed to break out beyond just the big four voice and multimodal device manufacturers. We had Google, we had Alexa, we had Microsoft. We don't even have Microsoft now. They're basically killing Cortana, which I also worked on. But yeah, they're basically cutting it out of Microsoft. It's going away. I have thoughts. I'm not going to go there. But there's so much else out there now. Skills developers and people building their own voice experiences outside of the major experiences. There's like the Bixby's of the world from Samsung and other companies trying to spin things up. Chatbots that are built into messaging platforms that can also support voice conversations. There's just so much. And and there's so many designers engaging in that. So I'm glad to see the industry has come so far. I left specifically working on voice design because I found I was getting pigeonholed. I would interview for jobs and people would say, well, you're just a voice designer. You can't work on this thing that has a graphical user interface. It's like, what? I have like 10 years of experience working on graphical user interfaces. But new thing, like people in the design industry like folks to fit into neat little boxes. I like variety. So I could see my career going down a path I couldn't get back from. So I intentionally stepped back and went to work on some other skills so that I didn't get boxed in. That meant not working on some cool problems, but it also gave me the flexibility to teach these concepts to folks, which I am very passionate about. So you lose some, you win some. Didn't get to continue working on things like the Alexa notifications platform that I designed, but I did get to start talking to folks about these and writing about these important concepts. That's voice design, and that's my outreach on voice design, and that's a big driver of my engagement in my career in the last few years. So if you have questions about that stuff, you should put it in the comments and we can go deeper on that. There's a lot about my multimodal design philosophies, which touch on a lot of my work on Alexa in my book, Design Beyond Devices, Creating Multimodal Cross-Device Experiences, which you can buy from Amazon or my publisher, Rosenfeld Media. But we can also talk about some of that stuff here. If you are thinking about becoming a voice designer, you may want to check out my article on Medium, So You Want to Be a Voice Designer, or some of my articles about voice design in general, why it matters, how it differs from chatbots, and a lot of the basic concepts and pitfalls along the way. There's a lot of content there if you're interested. So feel free to hit me up in the comments with questions. Thanks for sticking around, satiating your curiosity about voice design and kind of some of the lessons I learned early on. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks for stopping by, Magic Mafia. Till next time, subscribe, and of course hit that like button if you enjoyed what you saw.